My name is Claire Monroe. I'm 34. And this was the day they looked me straight in the eye and called me a failure without saying a single word. The air inside my parents' home was stiff with the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, it felt personal. No balloons, no welcome home banner. Not even a hug. Just my mother scrolling through her phone on the couch, casually liking a photo from my sister Harper's engagement shoot, while my father stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, measuring me like a stranger asking to stay the night. "You made it," Mom said, flatly. Her eyes didn't even lift from the screen. I stood in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, wearing the same black slacks and blouse I'd been traveling in for 14 hours. I didn't expect a parade. But I didn't expect to feel like a stranger either. I had been gone for over a decade, 15 years, to be exact. And yet, the only thing that changed in this house was my bedroom. What used to be my personal space had now been completely taken over by Harper's wedding planning. Boxes of white tulle, gold-foiled invitations, and a life-size cardboard cutout of her fiancé, an Army intelligence officer, stood where my dresser used to be. I slept in the garage that night. No exaggeration. An actual cot. In the garage. Next to the lawnmower and a broken treadmill from 2004. Thin walls didn't do much to mute the voices. I could hear them. My parents, excitedly talking about Harper's promotion, her upcoming ceremony, how proud they were that at least one of their daughters made something of herself. Mom's voice, hushed but cutting. Real officer. Army intelligence, not like. Her voice trailed off. But I knew how that sentence ended. Not like Claire. They thought I ran away. That I quit the Navy and disappeared overseas to find myself. That's what they told the family, anyway. They needed a story to explain why I stopped appearing in photos, why no one could find a single trace of me online. Truth is, I didn't run. I was recruited. But we'll get to that later. The day that burned itself into my memory like a brand was Harper's engagement party. The whole family came out, people I hadn't seen since high school. Dad's old Navy buddies. Harper's commanding officers. Military wives in tailored dresses. Everyone there looked so sharp, so proud, so certain of their place. And there I was. Standing by the catering table in a simple blouse and slacks. No uniform, no medals. No sign that I had ever worn a flag on my shoulder. No one spoke to me. They all knew what I was, at least what they thought I was. The sister who washed out. The alternative path sibling. A cautionary tale wrapped in polite silence. I reached for a glass of water when everything changed. The room shifted. It was like a ripple, whispers dying mid-sentence, glasses halting mid-air. Heads turned in unison toward the entrance. That's when he walked in. Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Ramirez. Broad shoulders. Perfect posture. Chest full of ribbons that caught the chandelier light like starlight. And I froze. Because the last time I saw that man, we were covered in dirt and blood, crawling through a sewage tunnel in northern Iraq, dodging sniper fire and radio silence. 7 years ago, a mission that didn't exist on paper. His eyes scanned the room like he was trained to methodically, precisely. Until they landed on me. And then, he stopped. The entire room faded. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. For a second, we didn't move. No smile, no wave. Just stillness. And then he straightened. Snapped to attention. Raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Ma'am. SEAL Commander." The champagne glass slipped from Harper's fingers. Shattered. My mother's phone clattered onto the floor next to it. My father's jaw went slack, his face flickering through confusion, disbelief. And something that looked like recognition. I said nothing. Didn't confirm, didn't explain. Just nodded barely. The kind of nod you give an old comrade at a gas station, not a stage performance. No theatrics. No confession. Just the truth, laid bare in front of everyone who'd spent years calling me invisible. Lieutenant Colonel Ramirez lowered his salute like it was any other Tuesday. Took a seat at the table. And the party, somehow, continued awkwardly, like a house trying to fix its own foundation after an earthquake. But inside me, something cracked. For 15 years, I had been a ghost. No Facebook, no Christmas cards, no Sunday calls. My name didn't even exist in public military databases. I had become what they needed me to be: untraceable. But that night, standing in my own family's living room while the truth rang out like a gunshot, I realized maybe I was done hiding. Maybe I was done letting them write my story. Because if even one person in that room finally merely saw meat was enough to start rewriting everything they thought they knew. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time I was the first to be praised. First to win the school writing contest. First to finish my physical fitness tests. First to volunteer at the local veterans center. Dad used to brag to his Navy buddies that his eldest would go officer route all the way. I was the one expected to take his legacy further. Claire Monroe Naval Academy material. But things began to shift around the time Harper hit high school. She was beautiful in the effortless way that made other girls self-conscious. Her grades were solid, not exceptional, but she had charm, and charm, in our family, often outweighed grit. Suddenly, conversations at the dinner table weren't about my SAT scores or physical training routines. They were about Harper's social calendar and who asked her to prom. I didn't resent her. Not then. But I noticed the difference. Dad started saying things like, "You push too hard, Claire," or "Let your sister have her moment." Mom suggested I try smiling more in photos. "You always look so intense," she'd whisper, brushing my hair behind my ear with that rehearsed softness. I still got into the Naval Academy. Full ride. But the celebration was muted. More like a polite acknowledgement than a proud uproar. Harper got a bigger reaction when she was accepted into a state college. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for applause. But then came the rejection. It started with a phone call my junior year. I had applied for a highly competitive SEAL training prep track, a long shot, especially for women. When I got in, I called home, barely able to contain my joy. Mom answered. "You sure that's safe?" she said flatly. "That's not exactly what I imagined for you." I remember gripping the phone tighter. "It's what I want, Mom." Silence. Then, "Well, if you think that's best." When I told Dad, he gave me a pat on the back. Not a hug. Just a quick slap of approval, like I'd chosen to study accounting. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling of my dorm room, trying to convince myself that their indifference didn't hurt. That their silence wasn't rejection in disguise. I completed the training. Quietly. Without fanfare, without their blessing. And then the real call came. It wasn't from a recruiter. It wasn't even from someone who should have known my name. It came through a red phone in a plain gray room. A shadow program. Ultra classified. All female. SEAL qualified, zero identity protocol. The kind of thing the government doesn't even officially admit exists. No medals. No public record. No safety net. It meant vanishing from everything I knew. When I told my parents I was taking a position overseas, I couldn't tell them where or why. "You're running," Dad had said. "I knew you didn't have the stomach for the long haul." "I'm not running," I whispered. But he'd already walked out of the room. Harper waved from the stairs with a shrug. "Maybe you'll find yourself out there." And just like that, I became the family ghost. Birthdays passed. I stopped getting invites. When my cousin got married, I saw the photos online. Harper was a bridesmaid. I wasn't even mentioned. Mom told relatives I'd left the Navy early and was off doing something with NGOs. The narrative was simple: Claire couldn't hack it. She broke. She left. But they didn't know what I was doing. They didn't know about the rescue in Yemen, the black site breach in Kandahar, the mission in Syria that required 10 days in a sandstorm with no reinforcements. They didn't know I was shot once in the shoulder, stitched it myself, and finished the op. They didn't know I saved 2 hostages from a bomb rigged with a heartbeat sensor. They didn't know I watched one of my own teammates die because I couldn't reach her in time. They didn't know. Because they weren't allowed to know. And yet, every now and then, I'd check in on Harper's social media from a hidden account. Her life looked so clean. Promotions. Celebrations. A fiancé who wore his uniform like a second skin. One photo hit me harder than I expected. Harper standing in our parents' kitchen, holding a cake that read, "Proud of our soldier." The caption said, "At least one of us made the family proud." The comments underneath? "Your sister's still doing that travel thing, right? She was always the wild one. Glad you stayed the course." It should have made me angry. But it didn't. It made me sad. They had no idea what I had given up to protect them. No idea what I carried in silence. Every scar. Every ghost. Every secret. But I told myself, they'll never know. And that's the point. We were trained to disappear. To succeed in silence. To serve without glory. I accepted that. Until Harper's engagement party. Until Lieutenant Colonel Ramirez walked through that door and looked me in the eye like I still mattered. Like the world we came from hadn't forgotten who I really was. And just like that, the lie my family had clung to for 15 years began to unravel. I disappeared by design. There's something strangely liberating about cutting ties, especially when those ties only ever weighed you down. When I boarded that unmarked transport plane, I wasn't just leaving home. I was leaving everything that had ever defined me. No last name. No rank. No medals. No Claire Monroe. Just Ghost, my call sign. My only identity for the next 12 years. We weren't even on paper. No pay stubs, no DD 214, no formal command chain we could point to if things went sideways. Our missions came encoded. Our lives were reduced to encrypted data, wipeable, deniable, forgettable. Our unit had 6 women. No press releases, no photo ops. Just scars, dog tags we weren't allowed to wear, and instincts sharpened by the kind of training most men never finish. We bled in silence. We saved lives in silence. And we lost sisters. In silence. We called it the Shadow War. Because it wasn't just about combat, it was about vanishing. It was about blending into countries where we weren't supposed to exist and completing objectives that wouldn't survive a single headline. My first mission nearly killed me. A hostage retrieval in Syria. Intel said 3 guards, turned out to be 8. I took a bullet through the rib. No exit wound. I had to cauterize the hole myself with the barrel of a heated rifle while the others secured the perimeter. 3 hours later, we extracted the hostage. I didn't sleep for 4 days. And yet, I didn't quit. I carried the names of our dead on the inside flap of my boot, scratched in with a nail file. Lisa, Shay, Anna. Names that never made it to a memorial wall. After missions, we returned to silence. No parades. No cheers. No one at the airport waiting to wrap us in a flag. Instead, we got dropped at a nondescript facility. Debriefed, scrubbed. And then reassigned. Some days, I wondered if I even existed. But what kept me going wasn't recognition. It was duty. Not the kind you do for show. The kind you do for the people who'll never know you were there. And through it all, I watched Harper's life from afar. Weddings. Uniformed smiles. Ceremonies with family members clapping in the front row. Her life was public. Honored. I remember seeing a video clip of her giving a speech at her officer school graduation. "This uniform means integrity," she said. "It means loyalty. It means showing up." I almost laughed. Because showing up is easy. When the world knows your name. What no one saw were the hours we spent under desert stars, stitching our own wounds. Or the nights we slept with our rifles cradled like infants. Or the weeks without showers, food, or backup. Once, in northern Yemen, we spent 11 days inside a shipping container gathering intel on a chemical plant posing as a textile factory. Rats chewed through our socks. My partner developed trench foot. We couldn't even light a match for warmth. But we got the data. We shut the whole operation down, and we vanished before the first drone strike. The irony? Even the people we saved will never know we were there. The closest thing I ever had to recognition was a single nod from Ramirez during extraction. That nod meant everything. But over time, the weight of invisibility started to wear thin. especially when my own family kept celebrating a version of honor I was never allowed to claim. I wasn't bitter. Not exactly. Just quietly hollow. Then came Storm Hatch. It was the mission that broke you, and the one that defined us. Northern Syria. 6 of us were inserted to dismantle a terrorist financing network bankrolling attacks across 3 continents. What was supposed to be a 48-hour mission turned into 12 brutal days. Our comms went dark after the first 72 hours. The local police who were supposed to support us betrayed us and did Shay over to a militia group. We got her back, but not without consequences. We held out in a bombed-out school, uploading terabytes of financial data while taking sniper fire from all directions. Anna got hit in the thigh. I pulled her behind the desk with one arm while firing with the other. We lost power. Used car batteries to keep the uplink running. And somehow, we made it. No casualties. Network destroyed. Every dollar traced, every cell neutralized. But when we returned, they buried it. Too messy. Too political. Too female. They praised a nearby drone strike unit instead. Gave their commander a medal. We didn't even get a debrief. Storm Hatch became a whisper. And we became nothing. I accepted that. Or thought I did. Until Harper's engagement party. Until Ramirez saluted me in front of the very people who never saw me. Until everything I'd buried began clawing its way back to the surface. But the real breaking point? It came 3 days later. My encrypted comm device Cecilent for years buzzed. Unauthorized access to Storm Hatch files. Location traced, Harper's base. I felt the blood drain from my face. Because what she'd found could get us all erased permanently. The moment I saw the alert on my encrypted comms, I knew. Someone had tripped the wire. Storm Hatch, the mission that was never supposed to exist, had just lit up a red flag. The access point? Traced to an IP address I knew too well. Harper. I didn't wait. That night, I drove 2 hours in silence to her off-base apartment. Her car was in the driveway. Kitchen lights on. From the window, I could see papers scattered across the counter, some military, some civilian. She was in uniform. Still had her hair pinned back from whatever function she'd just attended. But when she saw me at the door, all the confidence drained from her face. "Claire?" she said, like she wasn't sure if I was real. I stepped inside without asking. On the table was a printed folder. The title on the cover was enough to make my chest tighten. Operation Storm Hatch Classified. Level Alpha Black. "Where did you get this?" I asked. Harper's hands trembled. I didn't know what it was. I was researching for my thesis on women in special operations and it just opened. I only glanced at the first page before it locked me out. "You weren't supposed to see this," I said. My voice was low. Flat, controlled. "I didn't mean to," she began, but I raised a hand. She paused. And then whispered, "Was this you?" I didn't answer. Her eyes welled. "Claire, why didn't you ever tell me?" I stared at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Because I wasn't allowed to. And even if I could, you wouldn't have believed me." The next morning, the fallout began. Harper was suspended pending investigation for unauthorized access of classified material. And the whispers started again. But this time, not just in the family. At first, I thought the breach would quietly be contained. But I was wrong. Someone saw her mistake as an opportunity. Within days, internal memos began circling suggesting that Storm Hatch was a rogue mission, that it had gone off script, that it was an example of why unconventional units couldn't be trusted. They were preparing to bury us. Not just the mission. Us. And for the first time in 15 years, I made a decision that went against every protocol I'd ever followed. I went public. The Pentagon hearing was set. A congressional oversight committee, 5 men and 1 woman all in pressed suits, expecting to check a box, close a case, and go to lunch. They had no idea what was coming. I walked into the room in full Navy dress uniform. The same one I hadn't worn since I disappeared. My medals gleamed under the harsh lights. My shoulders were square, my boots silent against the marble. Every eye turned to me. A ghost in flesh. One committee member cleared his throat. "State your name for the record." I looked him in the eye. "Commander Claire Monroe. Formerly Ghost, Unit 71. Operation Storm Hatch." The silence that followed was dense enough to cut with a knife. And then I spoke. 3 hours. I told them everything. Not the whitewashed version. The truth. I told them about the betrayal in Syria, the extraction, the girl we saved, the nights we thought we wouldn't make it, the data, the deaths we prevented, the cost. I showed them bodycam footage sanitized for safety, but enough to break their composure. I handed over logs, reports, maps. But none of it hit as hard as what happened next. Harper stood. Hair pulled back. Voice steady. Uniform perfect. "My sister didn't disappear because she failed," she said. "She disappeared because her success was too inconvenient for the narrative we wanted." The female senator leaned forward. "Are you saying this breach wasn't accidental?" "No," Harper replied. "It was. But maybe it needed to happen. Because this isn't just about her. It's about every woman who was told she didn't belong. Every operator whose name was erased because it made someone uncomfortable." And just like that, the room shifted. They didn't speak for a long time. When the vote came in, it was unanimous. Storm Hatch would be declassified. My record restored. My rank recognized. But the real reckoning came later. It was a Sunday. Family dinner. Dad grilled steaks. Mom made her famous potato salad. Harper set the table for 4. When I sat down, no one tiptoed. No side glances. No awkward silences. Just presence. About halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat. "If you can," he said, barely above a whisper, "tell us about Syria." I looked at him. His eyes weren't judging. They were open. And so, I told them. Not everything. Some secrets still needed to stay buried. But enough. Enough for them to understand I never quit. Never ran. Never failed. I was just fighting a different war. One they were never meant to see. Until now. And, for the first time, I wasn't invisible. It's strange how quickly the atmosphere of a home can change. 1 month ago, I was sleeping in the garage beside rusted gardening tools, listening to my parents praise Harper's fiancé like he'd just won the Medal of Honor. Now, I was sitting at the same dining table I used to get scolded at for elbows on the surface, except this time, the room was different. Calmer. Softer. Real. Mom refilled my glass with lemonade like it was the most natural thing in the world. Dad cut his steak in quiet thought, no longer avoiding my gaze. And Harper sat beside me, her uniform still crisp even off-duty, but her shoulders, they looked lighter. That night, we didn't pretend. No one tried to erase the years between us. No one asked me why I hadn't written or called. Because deep down, we all knew if they had asked back then, they wouldn't have liked the answer. What mattered now was that I was seen. Not tolerated. Not explained away. But seen for who I actually was. And for a while, that was enough. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't a greeting card moment. It's a process. And it comes with terms. A few days later, Mom called me into the living room. She had pulled out an old photo album, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. She flipped through pictures of birthday parties, graduation gowns, backyard barbecues. I was in the early pages. Always up front. Always smiling. And then, slowly, I faded out. Page by page, my presence vanished. "I didn't know what to do when you left," Mom said, voice trembling. "I felt like you chose something over us, like you shut us out." I took a deep breath. "You never asked why. You just assumed I failed, and you let that version of me take root in everyone's mind." She nodded. "I did, and I'm sorry." I waited. Because apologies are easy. But then she added, "I want to do better. If you'll let me." That's when I believed her. Dad was harder. He didn't sit me down, didn't bring photos or words. Instead, he showed up. One morning, I found him in the garage, fixing the broken treadmill. The same one that hummed beside my cot that first night home. I used to think strength looked like medals, he said, not looking at me. Turns out, real strength is knowing you'll never get one, and still doing the job. He didn't ask for forgiveness. But in that moment, I gave it to him. Because not all apologies need words. Some come in the form of effort. Weeks passed. The Pentagon sent official confirmation. My service record was restored. My rank SEAL commander was relisted. And Storm Hatch? Now taught in covert ops strategy as a defining success in asymmetrical warfare. But the best recognition didn't come from generals. It came from a young woman, maybe 25, who approached me after I was invited to speak at a leadership conference in DC. She stood at attention, clearly nervous. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm applying for special operations. Do you have any advice?" I smiled. Because I saw something in her, I recognized a fire that doesn't need validation, only direction. "Yes," I said. "Don't let the silence fool you." She blinked. "Silence doesn't mean failure," I continued. "Sometimes the greatest victories happen in rooms no one ever hears about. Sometimes you win, and only the people you saved ever know." She nodded. And in that moment, it felt like something had passed between us, not a title, not a rank, but a legacy. These days, I live a little slower. Not because I'm tired, but because I've earned it. I still train, still consult, still serve, just in a different capacity now. But more importantly, I live fully, out in the open. Harper and I talk regularly now. Not just surface-level chatter, but real talk. About guilt. About expectations. About being women in uniforms that weren't made for us, yet we wore them anyway and wore them well. My parents? They're trying. Mom doesn't call Harper the successful one anymore. Dad asks about my missions too, even if I can't always answer. I don't need them to be perfect. I just need them to respect the truth. And they do now. So here's what I've learned in the quiet aftermath of chaos. Being underestimated hurts. Being erased scars deeper. But reclaiming your story, even if no one believed it for years, is one of the most powerful things a person can do. I didn't fight for medals. I fought for people who would never know my name. But now, I fight for those who still think their silence means they've failed. Because the world may never throw you a parade. But that doesn't mean you didn't win the war. And you? Have you ever been called a failure just because you walked a different path? Let me know in the comments below. Because sometimes, the loudest victories are born in silence.